Hello, lovelies. Housekeeping. I've finished writing the main portion of the Sengoku era RPG slash homage slash retro mutant, I guess, of Bushido. Retro mutant is what I'm calling things that are kind of clones but aren't really. And you can still get the original Bushido if you want, so I don't particularly want to tread on anyone's toes, but it's the same sort of feel, I suppose. T-Shirt Historian is helping me on the historical setting part and some of the cultural parts because he's a weeb. I'm currently working on the more supernatural side of it. Spells and magic, yokai, ghosts, all of that sort of thing. You can play the game straight and historical. You can play it somewhat fantastical, or you can go all in on the fantasy if you particularly want to. It's entirely up to you. I've got a couple of other people working on adventures for me, something for Grimdark, something for Machinations of the Space Princess, and some other stuff. Still, I haven't managed to take it particularly easy this year, but I'm trying. The pace of work is certainly slower. I just haven't found much time for hobbies somehow. That's the trouble with working for yourself. You end up working all the time, or finding it hard to find time for anything else without it feeling like you're costing yourself money. A couple of people have brought me up for criticising the Red Room and others, such as Dungeons and Discussions, Pundit, Venger, etc. I can disagree with people without having to necessarily excommunicate them, and unless it's something mega egregious, I'm not going to do so. Even with inappropriate characters, I removed myself, right? And I explained why I was making that choice at that time. Similarly, I am finding how to put it? I am finding the way that trans people are being treated by certain people. I almost said problematic there. No, I'm finding it rude and bullying. Yeah, there's a lot of awful people on the other side, but I never think that really excuses, though it can explain when people act in a nasty fashion the other way. And not Dungeons and Discussions, that's the show I do with T-Shirt. Dungeons and Diversity, the attacks on Matt Mercer for his depression, professed depression, that's over a line for me as well, because I'm a sufferer myself. I don't like having to do it necessarily, though I think part of the point of being a discordant friend in a group is to be the person who says something and acts as a check or whatever. But I've just learned through bitter experience that if I don't signal my own actual beliefs, and when people violate them, then my tolerance will be taken as endorsement and I'll be tarred with the same brush. It sucks. But this is the world that we live in. It has big, I am very intelligent vibes to make those accusations towards someone. Yeah, this is the world we live in. It sucks. Moving on. On my Daggerheart, what would you call it? Walkthrough, I suppose. Subcommandante says, it will sell loads, nobody will play it, but it will sell. Yeah, it will sell loads. I think a lot of people will try to play it and won't necessarily do that well with it. That said, since my Candela Obscura playthrough and review ended up on the Candela Obscura subreddit, people are playing it remarkably and at least telling themselves that they're having a good time with it. So some people will, probably. Remains to be seen how well it all works out. But with Dungeons and Dragons spiraling the drain in ever faster and tighter circles as time wears on, there's an opening here, and of the various personality games that are bubbling up, I think their version is the one that has the biggest chance of deposing D&D from the crown, but we shall see. Zerol Avenger 2 says, because 2d12 statistically looks like a pyramid, small bonuses will have a pretty outsized influence on the average result compared to rolling d20. I mean, that's true to an extent, but the bonuses are still small. Being able to combine an ability score bonus with an experience/skill bonus can get you up to +4 or +6 at level 1. No, it can't. +4 maximum if you are rolling on the stat that is +2, and if you have the experience that's applicable at +2. There aren't any skill bonuses. The only other thing you could get, as far as I could tell, was advantage, which adds up a d6 on top of that. But you're still not terribly competent necessarily going forward. Plus, you're going to get the fear effect roughly half the time. So, 2d12 gives you the... Well, it's not a curve, but like you say, a pyramid, but it does bulge in the middle. Because of that, you've got a game system that is going to produce more average results than anything else, but also wants to pitch itself as heroic. I don't know. It's not the choices I would have made. Yagsipk 287 says, I've seen people say, why can't people just let people enjoy something in response to people's criticism? Yes, a game that is in beta asking for feedback is now a bad thing. Also, I knew this was going to be the same clownery as the last one. Blah. In my game mods that I enjoy, and I will make for any games, it's semi-realistic in terms of how things would be. The world is not a nice place. Filth in the streets of towns and cities. Sickness, depravity of all sorts. People will suffer and horrible things will happen. Look at any decent RPG video game. Same stuff you see in them. And it's hard to make a critical role experience when that's all semi-scripted. Yeah, that's the thing. People will be looking to their game to replicate similar sort of experiences when that's just... It's not what you're going to get. They do professional wrestling, as I think the OGGM has said many times. You know, it's not actual wrestling. It's staged. It's semi-scripted. They're all voice talent. So you're not going to get the same thing at your table, really, no matter how hard you try. They might have been better off doing how to play the critical role way or something, or how to play your character the critical role way, and doing sort of generic GM/player advice book. It would still be inapplicable to most games, but might be better and would actually feed into what people probably want from them. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, if you're asking for feedback on a playtest, complaining when people give feedback on the playtest is just bonkers. Marion, unpronounceable second name, says the hope/fear mechanic sounds tedious with this current implementation. For every action check, and as a GM you have to find a meaningful positive or negative outcome, or what's the point? Applause for trying this game. Well, thank you. Yes, that was something we found with Candela Obscura and have found with other similar Powered by the Apocalypse or Blades in the Dark type games. There's a lot of pressure on the games master to come up with things, and however brilliant or experienced you are, you run out of inspiration for things to do. It would have been, I think maybe it would have been better if they'd reversed it, like said, here's some things you can do for Fear, plus any other weird stuff that happens to take your fancy and seems right. So if there were standardized results of Fear, that might be a better way to go about it. That might be a better way to go about a lot of their mechanics, to have set results, set consequences, but then allowing for you as the games master to flange it in whatever way you happen to want, rather than, as I believe another commenter pointed out, their default is, here's all these roles, and then just pull something out of your ass as the GM. Well, thanks, game. Super helpful. Doc Necrotic says, a quarantine is a quarantine, after I commented that it might act as a sort of quarantine area for these types of gamer. But if enough people can be conned into it, then it might be a D&D killer for a brief moment, maybe long enough for the suits to freak. I mean, it'll depend when it comes out. Hypothetically, in theory, depending what the hell is going on with their distribution, we're supposed to get the 5.5 or 6th edition, whatever you want to call it. That should be coming along. It doesn't look like we'll be getting this until after that. The time to strike with potentially new D&D killer games is to hit it while it's down, basically, or on the fag end of a particular edition. That's when it's vulnerable. That's when you can outsell it for a bit. So the best thing to do would be to release this a month or two before the new D&D edition comes out. Of course, the new D&D edition is staggering. It's player's book, bestiary, and DM's book. So there's a relatively large window during which the game isn't necessarily going to be hugely playable for a lot of people. But I don't think we're going to see Daggerheart before that edition is fully out, looking at the state of it currently. The Dave, very presumptive. The Dave says, the problem is their fans expect any Critical Role game to create the Critical Role experience. The problem is that the typical Critical Role episode has nothing to do with real TTRPGs. Yeah, because it's professional wrestling, it's performance. And believe it or not, that is why I like the tabletop-less games that I run to be as close to the real experience as possible, just with added boobies. But it was important for me not to go too far down the scripted Critical Role route. It just didn't really work. Chris with 2 S's says, no game based in your imagination can tell you what you can or cannot have at your table, or who you should or shouldn't have. It's up to you. The power has been with you all along. And I agree, of course I agree. But you have to review material, you have to review games based upon what you are presented, what there is in the book, what the intention is. Quite often when I review books, people say, but there's this one line in an obscure supplement that changes everything and you didn't take that into account, or if you don't like the rules you can change them. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm reviewing a product. I'm reviewing the product that is presented to me, not how other people have bodged it or added to it or taken away from it. You can't do a review on that basis. It just doesn't work. And also, for a lot of people, I suspect this will end up being their first role-playing game, right? And so their expectations and their frame of reference for all other TTRPGs will come from watching Critical Role and buying the Critical Role game. So, doubly, I think it's important. And they're not going to know that you can do whatever you want, or you should or shouldn't have particular rules or safety tools or whatever else, because they've got no other experience. So I think it's important to look at it that way. Neurolancer says, cards are feats, essentially. I agree that there are a few more fiddly bits that don't really seem to add anything to the game. You need cards, tokens, different dice, and so on, and so many small things to keep track of on the character sheet. The thing I do not agree is that safety tools are useless. I've seen them useful in my online games, and the evidence I have shows me that they are useful. On the other hand, Far Verona, UK Games Expo, innumerable other examples. There's either no need for them because you're playing with a regular group, no time for them because you're playing at a convention or a store game or a demo game, whatever, or they do no good, as in the examples I've mentioned and innumerable others. They're just pointless. Moving on the review of Greenhaven that I did, Carter Gabriel says, the population number absolutely kills me. Right off the bat, as you point out, that is basically a non-existent location that just happens to have a few people there. 100 is insanely low, even for the Dark Ages. But I lost it when you described all these city-level shops and locations. Those establishments alone, just the workers and their families, is probably above 100 right off the bat. I mean, how many are in the brothel? One woman? One blacksmith, who is somehow an expert at weapon repair rather than basic nails and tiny metal bits. One tavern keeper who brews everything themselves and cooks and cleans and serves. And everyone is a single individual with no family and no children. Have to be. And no population left for farmers, despite Nero, when the vast majority of people work in agriculture. It's just clownish. A great laugh. Well, okay, so I think you're being slightly unfair there. If this was a small community that had sprung up around an inn, so that while you were travelling from one place to another place, you passed through here, if it had a lot of through traffic on a road or a river or whatever else, then you could see having a small commercial sort of neighbourhood spring up. Also, I think the default sort of setting here isn't meant to be Dark Ages accurate, but rather fantasy RPG standard accurate. And magic makes a huge difference, and elves will have small families over millennia, for example. So these are all things that you can take into account. I do still think the population number should be higher, but I'm just pointing out that it's a bit more elastic than some people are perhaps necessarily giving it credit for. And if it is a travel location in a fantasy setting, that also explains a lot of the rest, I think, how it would make sense. I think you're also a little unfair about tavern keepers who brew everything themselves, because that was the standard for a very long time. You would have alewives who would brew everything at home and then would take it basically door to door around where anyone might want a drink, and then eventually they started selling out of their homes, and those became inns and taverns. But pretty much everyone brewed at home, historically speaking. So that's a little unfair as well. I felt like a lot of people were a bit unfair in the comments, while I was striving to be very, very fair and to be constructive in my criticism. Lepidoptera says, so Ryan David had AI draw images of and write up a description of Stardew Valley, and 50 people paid at least 10 cents for him to get a silver rating on DTRPG. Grifter's gonna grift, I guess. Like I said, people were a bit unfair when it came to that, and that is a take so uncharitable it should run for president for the Libertarian Party. Moving on. Elf King, I did a review of that. Yagsipk says, I have zero issues with AI art, more so with smaller creators. If it's a big company, then less so. It's a great tool for small creators who can't get too much artwork without it being very expensive. Many books end up having all raised money go to art, and the creator ends up with nothing for their work. I think a mix is good for most small creators. Spend money on the cover and a couple of small bits in the book. Covers really draw people in at the end of the day. Yeah, that's the way I have worked in the past. I will pay for a cover and a few bits and pieces of art in the book, and then use stock art where I could find applicable stock art for the rest. But I don't think that's going to be competitive in this market. It's probably what I'll still do. And then I would be using AI art for filler here and there, where I need other odd pieces where I couldn't get it anywhere else. But it's not like that's going to be costing anybody, because they wouldn't be being paid anyway. I think for smaller creators, given the low margins, as you mentioned, it is tempting. And I find both AI boosterism and Ludditism both incredibly aggravating. Vidgrip says, thank you for mentioning font size and readability. I have binned what might be great games because I could not read them comfortably. Nothing in the rulebook is more important than readability, and many reviewers won't even mention it. Well, my eyes have become fucked. I've always had poor eyesight and needed glasses, pretty much. But my eyeball's nearly exploding, and now I'm developing a cataract, so readability is more of an issue for me recently. So yeah, I don't think it's the be all and end all, but there are things you can do. Unfortunately, I've had to use smaller fonts than I would have liked in some games, but then choice of font can make a big difference as well. So, you know, there's options. On the Sweet Baby issue, on which I've reluctantly made a couple of videos, Lepidoptera says, sarcastically, but Matt Walsh did a video just the other day saying the Woken games were never discussed before SBI was uncovered this month. Nobody had ever talked about it before March 2024. I concur with your sarcasm, but it has been incredibly heartening to see everybody, but especially Grums, telling Matt Walsh to fucking do one for trying to elbow his way into this. I think after Milo Yiannopoulos last time around, people are a bit gun shy. Now, there is an argument to be made that anyone willing to talk about the issue is good to have on board, and that since mainstream media is not going to give the truth the time of day, that you should take whatever publicity you can. And I certainly would have believed that argument 10 years ago, but now, no. I think the best thing to do is to reject Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire and people like that. There is this whole alternative media ecosystem now that is neither partisan pseudo-left or partisan extreme right, so I don't know that we need them anymore. But I accept that there is an argument. The Dave says, frankly, I'm just tired of politics being so blunt in art and media. If you want to make a political message, do it like in the old days. Make it subtle and interesting. Now people just yell at you with a megaphone. Here is my political message. Did you get it? Did you get it? Yeah. My inner auteur despairs at how blunt and unsubtle a lot of this stuff is. That just makes it bad. There's no art to it. And I would argue that it's less effective. You know? Some kid reading the X-Men back in the 90s or whatever, and thinking, oh wow, the way these mutants are treated with all their superpowers, it's just like how, I'm different in whatever way that they happen to be different, and that's not fair either. Or thinking, my friend is a bit different and it's not fair that he gets treated horribly. I hope Sentinels don't come to crush him. That's not a particularly artful message, but it was subtext. And by being about mutants, people could take it and apply it to their own lives in all kinds of different ways. But these days, it's just a megaphone telling you what the political message is and what you're supposed to take from it. So it's just, I agree 100%. Hexcrawler says, but the latest revelations have shown that the government is involved, buddy. No, not really. And this is what drives me crazy. Right, the Department of Homeland Security has given grants and loans and whatever else to a whole bunch of tech companies that examine tech media, looking for how it has an effect on extremism and so on. So they're not funding people to monitor gamers or to treat gamers as terrorists or whatever. They're just throwing money at a problem that they have, in that a lot of extremism has moved online or moved into the dark web, or jihadis are organizing in guild chat on Warcraft. Shit like that is happening. White supremacists are doing the same thing in other online forums and chats and encoded peer-to-peer chat and so on. So they're looking for ways to monitor or counter that, which is understandable, but the problem is that it also tends to draw in normal people, and also that paranoid fuckmuppets will make little lines of red string and pins on the map to say, you see, the government is behind this. No, they're just profligate spenders and waste money on idiots. Foxtrot Element says, let creatives craft their works without a filter and then let the free market decide if it has a place or not. Right, now, this is going to sound weird coming from a left anarchist, right? But I miss when capitalism was capitalistic when it comes to the creative industries, at least, if not other ones. Because people would just do what worked, what people liked, what people would buy, and there were niches available for people who had niche interests as well. But these days it seems that chasing that grant money has completely distorted, I wouldn't even necessarily say the free market, but the creative market, the marketplace of ideas, not money necessarily. It's distorting it all. And while deeply imperfect, when companies were just chasing good ideas for money, that was better than what we currently have, which is a kind of corporatist patrician attitude. User string of letters and numbers says, conspiracies winning as usual. Strong, don't kill your enemies, that's how they win vibes. Your boycott advice would go for better if the left weren't busy trying to infect game companies, government and language itself to make the sort of protest to learn and avoid things you don't like impossible. I only wanted to play video games, play RPGs and read comics, and now I guess we're just supposed to be kind and loving. Grim, good luck with that. Yes, I know it's a bitter pill to swallow, but in the long term, you are much better off holding and maintaining the moral high ground. I know it's difficult. It's not the path of least resistance. It's much easier to just blow up in the same way as you imagine your enemies are. But that's how your enemies got to the place that they are, by being ungenerous with other people. Also, this isn't the left. I mean, I'm going to assume that you're in the States. You don't really have a political left in the States. You have a far right and you have a centre right. and a few outliers slightly left of centre, like Bernie Sanders. He'd be a fairly conservative centre-left politician anywhere else in the world than the States. But the left isn't about any of those things. All of these things are antithetical to left-wing thought, as I tire of saying. Plix Linuxy says, so this was in reply to a string of comments, but so you're going to miss some context, but yeah, tough. I think I said both Marx and Gramsci would be appalled at the current pseudo-progressive, pseudo-left. So Marx I could see, but Gramsci, I don't know. He struck me, like most in the former Trotskyite left, as a man who wanted to push for a permanent cultural revolution with ever more convoluted intersectional relationships, and his ideas had no real end game in sight for their implementation. In many ways, Gramsci might have preferred the company of Klaus Schwab and BlackRock and 21st century Disney as the true heirs to achieving his goals than the liberals in Europe and the US. All his philosophies have led to is a massive and bigger class division than any form of unity within the working class. But a lot of sweet money laundering has taken its place. Maybe you ought to put a commentary on why Gramsci should not be treated as a villain and point out where his philosophy benefited people in the past. Alright, here it is. Gramsci believed that a class, any class, even the ruling class that had to be dislodged, couldn't dominate purely on an economic basis, nor entirely for long through force or coercion. Rather, any ruling class would need to be able to present intellectual and moral leadership, and would have to make alliances and compromises to form what he and Sorel, I think, called a historic bloc. That bloc, at sufficient size, doesn't represent a ruling class, but rather represents the overall consent in society to a particular way of ordering and organising things. And that is a more enlightened and open-minded approach than today's pseudo-progressives, because he specifically says that alliances and compromises are necessary, and alliance and compromise requires that you be open-minded and open to change. I mean, Trotsky's main feature, talking about the Trotskyite left, was this idea of permanent revolution, that the change that you have made must be safeguarded and you must constantly be on guard against new ruling classes emerging, so that you need this state of permanent revolution. It doesn't actually mean, barricades in the street and shooting people revolution, but rather that you can't rest on your laurels, and I think that's fine. I think Gramsci's analysis is too far in the opposite direction, away from materialist analysis of say, Marx, but he's not wrong. And that spirit of persuasion, leadership and compromise is worth having, and that constant state of permanent revolution, constantly being on guard for the emergence of new ruling classes, as we see in this pseudo-progressive, pseudo-left, that's worth having. In that sense, Gramsci is far closer to Fabian gradualism and European social democracy. He's far closer to that than Leninist revolutionary fervour, I would say. Your mileage may vary, and if anyone else who isn't interested in political analysis is still awake, I had a comment out of the blue on my Lancer review. George Lilly, trying to be sarcastic, saying, "So it has a loose narrative portion and a crunchier battle system, like every single TTRPG in existence. This isn't a problem, it's how TTRPGs work." No, it isn't, I say, as someone with a couple of decades of experience under his belt. Lancer has a very loose narrative portion of the game, and what is almost an entirely different game for its battles. We can compare and contrast that with, say, Heavy Gear, where the same system translates effortlessly between playing battles, or even playing miniatures battles, should you so wish, and its role-playing section. So no, that is not how TTRPGs work. You're wrong. So no. On the Demons of Chernobyl review, Space Roadie says, I wrote this. Thanks for the glance, Grim. Grim. Great constructive criticism. Love it. Well, that's what I try to do, and that is why it gets my back up when people react so utterly negatively. I am terrible at taking negative feedback, so I try not to be entirely negative with anybody, even Darrington Press. So hopefully I manage, and if you ever think I'm just being nasty to a product, let me know, because that's not what I want to be doing. And lastly, on my Umami Adult Consultancy video, Judd Goswick says, I know this is satire, but it would be really cool if you started getting gigs. I do offer consultancy, not on the things I was mocking there, but I do offer consultancy at a base of $20 an hour, which isn't much, really. So if anyone wants any advice on starting up a small press, putting their game together, or wants me to review their game and then punch it up where I think they're being pussies, then let me know. Zang. On a crazy whim, I recorded the almost entire 5th edition D&D SRD as an audiobook, and you can pick that up, pay what you want, on DriveThruRPG, or you can listen to it on a playlist on my YouTube channel, Postmortem Video.
You anything you want. You just have to talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. I'm your priest. I'm your shrink. I'm your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man. The Santa Claus of the subconscious. You say it. You even think it. You can have it.